So today I'm at Buckland Abbey, which is the home of Sir Francis Drake, or was the home of Sir Francis Drake anyway. And I've caught it with just enough time to catch some of the stunning Christmas decorations that they've had up over Christmas. So let's go and explore. As you first walk into Buckland Abbey, you get a little map of the property, like you do at all National Trust properties, and you open with the shop and the cafe. Now, this was a pretty grey and miserable British day, so nothing is really looking that impressive, although the inside of this barn looked extra impressive in the gloomy weather. So the original uses of these long halls in Viking times were to serve as the beating heart of the Norse villages. Sometimes they were as long as 60 metres, and they were often where kings and local lords would be found by their people attending feasts and celebrating the turning of the seasons together. So although the Great Hall has been set out as a Viking display for visitors, its origins are actually from medieval times when it was built by Cistercian monks, also known as white monks, to store wool, fleece, cattle hides and crops such as oat, wheat and fruit from their nearby orchards. The barn also stored tithes, which were a form of local tax, whereby farmers gave 1/10 of their produce to the church. Buckland Abbey began life in 1278 as a Cistercian monastery ran by wealthy monks. It was in fact the last Cistercian monastery to be built in England and Wales. The Cistercians, also known as white monks due to their undyed habits, were a branch of the Benedictine order. They followed strict routines and lived a life of austerity, prayer and manual labour. They were such hard workers, their order became one of the richest and most influential. The monastery was dissolved during Henry VIII's Reformation, and it was redeveloped as a 16th century Tudor mansion, later becoming the residence of the very famous explorer Sir Francis Drake. The first room is full of these maps and murals that were designed by Roland Pym. We then head upstairs to the two main floors, and you're supposed to really go straight to the one I'm looking at now, but I saw an opportunity to get a quiet shot of the Sir Francis Drake statue, so I quickly ran upstairs, but don't follow me because it makes it more complicated to then get out. The Sir Francis Drake statue is a plaster statue that was made by Sir Joseph Boham. He was the official sculptor to Queen Victoria. The statue had been lost for many years and was rediscovered by chance in the undergrowth on Haldon Hill near Exeter. A piece of corrugated iron had protected most of the statue. Unfortunately, the feet were sticking out and they had been damaged by the elements and water. To move the statue to Buckland Abbey, the National Trust had to break it up into several pieces and then restore it carefully in the Lifetimes Gallery. I found the upstairs of this property really fascinating because there was lots of information on life at sea and what it would have been like to go on these long voyages, and also a lot about the Spanish Armada, which I didn't know anything like enough about. The Spanish Armada was an interesting battle because it was one that England probably should not have won. It all began in 1588 after years of simmering tensions between the two countries. King Philip of Spain, with financial support from the Pope, prepared a vast fleet which he referred to as the Invincible Armada. However, such a large fleet could not be hidden, and the English were prepared with Sir Francis Drake as their second in command, and they were prepared to fight for the survival of England. The so-called Invincible Armada was outfoxed by the English and then battered by storms whilst limping back to Spain. At least a third of its ships ended up sunk or damaged. The defeat of the Spanish Armada led to a huge surge of national pride in England. So here we have the dressing up section where you can dress up and get to see how you would look in some of the traditional costumes of the time that would have been worn at sea. I'm sure this area is really meant for kids, but I like to show you everything there is to do. Sir Francis Drake was actually seldom home during his ownership of Buckland Abbey, as he was away at sea much of the time. His final voyage was in 1595, where a fever broke out on board the ship, and he died of dysentery in 1596, which was sadly rather common when on these long voyages. His brother took ownership of the property afterwards, and the estate remained in the family until 1946 when it was handed over to the National Trust. So this is the floor that you should have really come to first, and there's a lot of artifacts on this floor from Sir Francis Drake's life. This is one of my favourite pieces, the Golden Hind, which is a model of Sir Francis Drake's flagship. Originally called the Pelican, it was renamed in 1578 in honour of Drake's sponsor, Sir Christopher Hatton, whose crest was a golden hind. This model was made by Hubert M. Brooks in 1972. Something I noticed about all the portraits of the women were their resemblance to Elizabeth I. It isn't Elizabeth I, although some of them do look a lot like her. It's just that a lot of women at the time wanted to emulate that look. So this room has a very special artifact in it, which is a self-portrait by Rembrandt. It's often called the Lost Portrait because it was hanging around the National Trust for many years without them realising the value or significance of this painting, because it was originally thought to be painted by one of his pupils. But later, after re-examination by the world's leading Rembrandt experts, it was found to be an original self-portrait by Rembrandt himself, painted in 1635. That makes this painting now worth a whopping £30 million. This makes it the first Rembrandt in the National Trust's collection of 13,500 paintings. Be sure to check out the gorgeous engraving on the windows, this one celebrating the Armada defeat in 1588. Here we enter into the kitchen, which is an almost complete example of an original Tudor kitchen. So this was Buckland Abbey's chapel, and it's particularly special as it was discovered by the last Lady Drake, who lived here in 1917. During her repair work on the room, she found the site of the high altar, originally from the monks. So this is the kitchen garden, which is obviously looking a little bit dead since it's December. There wasn't a lot going on in it, but I would love to see it again in spring or summer. So the kitchen garden was actually recently a part of a renovation costing £54,000 to restore the Grade 1 listed kitchen garden wall. During the works, they uncovered new evidence of buildings that probably related to the 16th century monastery. So this lovely outbuilding was the cider house and garden, where the cider would be pressed. It's now being used as a yoga room inside with a beautiful view over the countryside. So that's all from the beautiful Buckland Abbey. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please check out some of my other videos from other National Trust properties. I'll give you one final walk through the beautiful Great Hall, which has been decorated in Viking wares before I leave.